When he was just 8 years old, little Mateo stood beside a hospital bed, clutching his mother's cold hand while doctors whispered that she had only minutes left. With tears running down his face, he did the only thing he knew. He began to sing. What happened next became a miracle the world never forgot, and a memory that would shape his heart forever. The sun was still rising over the small coastal village of San Isidro when 80-year-old Mateo ran barefoot through the dusty streets, his laughter echoing in the morning breeze. To the rest of the world, he was just another child, skinny, messy-haired, wearing hand-me-down shorts. But to his mother, Althea, he was the entire universe. They lived in a tiny wooden house near the shore, where the smell of the ocean mixed with the scent of warm rice and coffee every morning. Life wasn't easy. Money was always short, bills always late, but Althea made sure Mateo never felt the weight of their struggles. She worked in the market during the day and washed clothes for neighbors at night. Still, no matter how exhausted she was, she always returned home with a smile and a song. Their nightly ritual was sacred. Mateo would crawl into bed, and Althea would sit beside him, brushing her tired fingers through his hair as she sang the lullaby her mother once sang to her. Huwag kang matakot, nandito lang ako. Don't be afraid, I am always here. Mateo didn't fully understand the words then, but he felt them. In that lullaby, he felt safe. He felt whole. Music became their language. When they were happy, they sang. When they were tired, they sang. When they didn't have enough food, they sang louder. And every time the world felt too heavy, that melody reminded them that love was stronger than hardship. But one ordinary afternoon changed everything. Althea was cooking lunch while Mateo sat on the floor drawing pictures of them singing on a big stage. Someday him with a microphone, her cheering from the front row. He ran to show her the drawing, tugging her hand with excitement. But her smile suddenly faded. Her face turned pale. She pressed a hand to her chest, gasping for air. "Mum," Mateo whispered, frozen. The spoon fell from her hand, clattering onto the floor. Then she collapsed. The next minutes were a blur, neighbors rushing over, a borrowed tricycle speeding toward the hospital, Mateo sitting in the back, holding his mother's lifeless hand, begging her to wake up. When they arrived, doctors and nurses immediately swarmed around her. Mateo stood alone in the hallway, shaking, his bare feet cold on the tiles. A doctor pulled him aside with a voice that tried to be gentle. "We're doing everything we can, but her heart is very weak. You should prepare yourself." But Mateo didn't understand the word prepare. He only understood one thing: his mother was leaving him. Through the glass window of the ice, he saw her, motionless, unresponsive, surrounded by machines that beeped like warnings. Fear took over his small body. He pushed past the nurse, ran to the bedside, grabbed her hand, and cried, "Mama, please, don't go." No one knew why. He did it next. Maybe instinct, maybe hope, maybe love. He placed a hand against his cheek. "And you began to sing." His voice was soft at first, trembling with tears. The same lullaby she sang to him every night. Huwag kang matakot, nandito lang ako. Doctors paused. Nurses froze. And then, the impossible. The heart monitor, once slowing, began to rise. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes flooded open. One nurse whispered through tears, "The boy." He brought her back. And in that moment, the world witnessed something medicine could not explain: the power of a child's love. After the miracle in the ice, Matthias, nothing in Matthias' world was ever the same again. The story spread through the hospital first, nurses whispering with trembling smiles. Doctors exchanging baffled looks, people replaying the moment in their minds, as if trying to make sense of something bigger than science. By the next day, strangers began arriving at the little market where Althea worked, asking, "Is this where the boy who saved his mother lives?" Some came out of admiration. Some came out of curiosity. Others came simply to touch his head, believing he carried something sacred. But Matteo didn't understand any of it. All he knew was that his mother came home alive, and that was all that mattered. For weeks, their house overflowed with visitors, bringing gifts, food, even money wrapped in envelopes. People wanted to hear Matteo sing. They wanted to see whether his voice could heal others too. Some carried sick children. Some brought elderly parents in wheelchairs. The line stretched outside their small wooden home. Althea watched from the doorway, her heart torn. She knew these people were desperate, just as she had been. She wanted to help them all. But she also wanted to protect her son. Matteo didn't understand why she told the crowd no again and again. He tugged on her sleeve and whispered, "Mum, should I sing? What if it can help them too?" Althea knelt to eye level, her voice tender but firm. "You sang for me because you love me, not because people expect you to. Never sing because someone demands it. Only sing when your heart tells you to." She knew that people would want to label him a miracle, a healer, a spectacle. But she refused to let her son grow up carrying the weight of other people's lives on his shoulders. As visitors left disappointed, whispers shifted. Why won't he sing for others? Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the miracle wasn't real. Rumors didn't stop there. Some even accused Althea of using her son for attention. Matteo overheard things that children shouldn't hear. He learned early that miracles don't only bring gratitude, they also attract doubt. Still, Althea encouraged him to be strong. Every night, she sat with him on the edge of their bed and reminded him, "Your voice didn't save me because it's magic. It saved me because it came from love. Don't ever lose that." Life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after the impossible. Bills still needed paying. Food was still expensive. Work was still tiring. But music continued to be their refuge. On weekends, they sang together outside the house, not for the crowd, but for joy. Matteo's voice grew richer, more emotional. Neighbors began saying, "That boy's going to be famous someday." And Matteo believed it too, not for recognition or money, but because he dreamed of giving his mother a life free from struggle. He imagined seeing her in the front row of a big stage, proud and smiling. But even as he dreamed, the shadow of the miracle followed him quietly. Wherever he went, people stared. Some admired him. Some feared him. Some expected him to achieve the extraordinary every time he opened his mouth. Matteo didn't know yet that the gift that saved his mother would someday break him. But, for now, he held on to hope, singing from a place of love, unaware of the day when life would test that love again. 15 years passed like pages turning in a book silently. Quickly, without anyone noticing how much had changed, Matteo was no longer the small, fragile boy who once clung to his mother's hand in the ICU. At 23, he stood tall, confident, with a voice that shook audiences to their core. Music had become his dream and his purpose, not for miracles, but to build the future he promised his mother. Every morning before work, he sang while she cooked. Every evening after rehearsals, she waited up so they could eat together. Time had aged her face and slowed her steps, but her eyes warm, unwavering, overflowing with pride, never changed. One afternoon, Matteo received the call he had been waiting for his entire life, an invitation to audition for a televised talent competition in Manila. It was everything he had worked for. everything he had prayed for. He rushed home, bursting through the door with joy. "Mum, I got in," he shouted, holding the letter in the air. Althea covered her mouth, tears falling instantly. "I knew it, Anak. I always knew it. Your voice was meant to be heard." They celebrated with a small meal, just rice, noodles, and laughter, but for them, it felt like a feast. The next morning, Matteo packed for Manila. It was the first time he would be away from his mother for more than a day, and though she encouraged him bravely, he noticed the way she held his hands tighter than usual, as if memorizing the shape of them. "Remember," she said softly, "sing from love, not for approval." He nodded, hugged her, and left. But the dream blurred into nightmare only 3 days later. Matteo was rehearsing backstage for his audition when his phone vibrated. At first he ignored it. Nerves were high, cameras were everywhere, but when it buzzed again, something in his chest tightened. He stepped aside and answered. A neighbor's trembling voice spilled through the speaker. "It's your mother." She collapsed. They rushed her to the hospital. "It's her heart again." The world around him collapsed. The lights, the stage, the cheering contestants, everything faded into a distant hum. In seconds, he grabbed his bag and ran. He didn't even collect his audition badge. There was only one destination that mattered. The bus ride home felt endless. He sat with his head bowed, hands clenched like that frightened child from 15 years ago. Memories flashed, singing beside her bed, saving her, believing miracles were possible. But now, doubt gnawed at him. Was he still capable of the impossible? When he arrived at the hospital, he already knew before anyone said a word. His mother lay in the ICU, just as before, motionless, pale, surrounded by machines that beeped like fading echoes of life. Doctors approached him with the same heavy expressions he remembered from childhood. "We'll do everything we can, but she may not make it through the night." Matteo's knees weakened. His breath trembled. It was the same nightmare, but this time, he was no longer a child. He didn't need anyone to explain. He understood too well. He walked toward the bed, took her cold hand the same way he had once done, and whispered with a voice already breaking, "Mom, please don't leave me." And then, because he didn't know what else to do, he began to sing. The same lullaby, the same words, the same love. But this time, something was different. The lullaby trembled from Matteo's throat, like a fragile beam of light struggling against darkness. "Huwag kang nandito lang ako, don't be afraid. I'm right here." He sang the words with every memory, every promise, every piece of the life they shared, birthday mornings, sleepy hugs, nights when rain tapped the roof as they whispered about the future. The notes quivered with fear, but burned with love. For a brief, breathtaking moment, just like all those years ago, the machines responded. The heart monitor climbed a little. Nurses leaned forward. A doctor paused in place. A spark of hope flickered inside Matteo's chest. Please work." Just like before, he sang louder, pushing through sobs. But the rise didn't last. Slowly, steadily, the heart rate began to fall again. "Come on, Mama, stay with me," he begged, his voice cracking between verses. He pushed closer, gripping her hand, tears falling onto her sheets. He sang until his throat burned, until it felt like his heart was shattering with every note. But her breathing weakened. Her fingers slipped from his grip. Her eyes, still half open, looked at him with a softness he had seen his whole life, love without fear. His voice broke completely. "It's not enough. I'm not enough," he whispered, collapsing over her chest. He could feel her life fading beneath his cheek, as if time itself was pulling her away. The doctor approached slowly. "Son, she's fading. Let her go peacefully." But Matteo refused. To stop singing? He sang through cries, through shaking breaths, through denial. His voice no longer sounded like music, it sounded like heartbreak. He was no longer the miracle child the world once talked about. Just a son begging the universe for one more minute. And then the moment he feared most, the heart monitor, reached a flat, sterile tone. The lullaby died in his mouth, mid-verse, silence. A silence so heavy it didn't feel like the absence of sound. It felt like the absence of life. Matteo collapsed against her, sobbing in a way the walls had never heard before. He wasn't crying because he lost a miracle, he was crying because he lost the only person who ever believed that he didn't need to be one. A nurse, the same woman who had rushed to help 15 years earlier, stood at the doorway watching. Through tears, when she finally stepped forward, she knelt beside him and placed a hand on his back. "You didn't fail her," she whispered gently. She held on as long as her body could, just to hear your voice one last time. Those words shattered him and healed him at the same time. He realized he hadn't been singing to save her. He had been singing so she wouldn't die alone. Althea didn't slip away because his voice wasn't powerful enough. She slipped away because she had no more strength left. And she waited until the person she loved most was there. The little boy who once saved his mother's life had grown into a man who gave her peace in her final breath. And sometimes, love is the only miracle we get. The day of the funeral arrived with grey skies and quiet streets, as if the world itself understood that a light had gone out. The small church overflowed with people, neighbors, friends, even strangers whose lives had been touched by Althea's kindness. Some brought flowers. Some brought food. Some brought nothing but tears. But every single person came because Althea had loved them in ways only a mother could. Matteo sat in the front pew, his suit borrowed, his hands shaking. He looked at the polished wooden coffin, unable to accept that the woman who once walked him to school, sang him to sleep, and held him through every ache, was now silent, gone, unreachable. For the first time in his life, music felt like an enemy. His voice, the same voice that had once brought hope, now felt useless. He wanted to stay quiet, hide away, and disappear into grief. But just before the ceremony began, the priest leaned toward him. "Your mother always spoke of how proud she was of your voice," he said softly. "Would you like to sing for her?" Matteo's first instinct was no. Singing was what he did when he wanted to save his mother, and he couldn't save her anymore. But then he saw a memory, her, sitting on their small bed, brushing his hair, whispering, "Sing from love, Anuk, not for applause." And he realized, maybe this wasn't about saving her. Maybe this was about thanking her. So he stood, legs weak, breath uneven, and faced the crowd. The first note barely came out. Then another. Then another. His voice shook with grief at first, but it began to steady as he closed his eyes and pictured her smiling at him, full of life, full of warmth. He didn't sing the lullaby. He chose a song she always hummed while cooking, while doing laundry, while laughing, a song that meant life, not loss. Halfway through, he could no longer hold back tears, but he didn't stop. The audience cried with him, not because the song was sad, but because it overflowed with love. When he finished, the church was silent for a full 5 seconds. Then people stood, one by one, offering what applause could never express. It wasn't for performance, it was for love. Weeks passed. Grief didn't leave, but it softened. One morning, As Matteo walked through the market where his mother had once worked, he saw a little girl sitting alone on a bench, crying because she couldn't afford music lessons. Something inside him shifted. He knelt beside her. "Do you like to sing?" he asked. She nodded. "Then come tomorrow. You don't need money, just a dream." That moment planted a seed. Within months, he opened a small music school, free for children from low-income families. He painted for words. Across the wall in bright blue letters, "Music is meant for love." The school became a place where children found confidence, hope, and belonging, the things his mother gave him every day of his life. And whenever the children performed, Matteo stood in the back of the room, smiling quietly. His voice was no longer meant to save the world, it was meant to make it kinder. Althea may have left the earth, but her love lived on in every child who learned to believe in themselves. Because one boy once did the same,